Welcome to this special meeting of full council. We have some significant matters to consider today, and I want to ensure we proceed without any delay on the matters before us. Verona, can you give us the SEDERUNT and any apologies?
Yes, thank you, Leader. We have apologies from Councillors Bell, Charteris, Dempster, Giusti, McGregor, Maitland and Surtees, and everyone else is present, yes.
Thanks. Do members have any declarations of interest with regard to what we're discussing today? Councillor Gilroy.
Yes, on item 1, which is, and on page 196, I have an interest in the property in Oppen.
Councillor McClellan.
Thank you, Leader. Page 117, Annan site, ANN.H203. I have been the agent for that application.
Thank you. Okay. We move on to item 3, the proposed local development plan 2 and the representations. This report marks a key milestone in the process of replacing our current local development plan with a new LDP2 within the required timescale of 5 years and by September 2019. We have already been through many of the key stages which are set out in Appendix 5 of the report. Most recently, we agreed the proposed plan in January as a settled view of the Council. Before the Council can adopt the plan, it must go through independent review and scrutiny by a Scottish Government-appointed reporter, who will examine all the issues raised in representations submitted during the recent period for public comment. The reporter will make binding recommendations on whether the plan has to be changed before we adopt it. This process is important for maintaining public confidence in the planning system, acting as a check and balance, reassuring those who have submitted objections that these will be assessed independently. Members will have received representations from people responding to the recent consultation, asking us to make significant changes, such as taking sites out or putting sites into the plan. It is too late for the Council to make significant changes. That was the purpose of our meeting in January. Any further significant changes would require a further period of consultation, and the Council would not meet the required deadlines for LDP2 to come into effect in a year's time. However, objectors can be reassured that their views will be submitted to and considered by the reporter. The report outlines the representations received in Appendix 1 and recommends a Council response that will be submitted to the reporter. The main purpose today is to agree that response so that officers can proceed with the arrangements for the examination. Members should note that the proposed responses indicate a number of issues where we will be agreeing that a minor change to the plan would be acceptable, and these are highlighted in Appendix 2. I suggest that we deal with Appendix 1 first, issue by issue. Given the volume of issues and responses, members have been issued with a list of the issues, which I will take in sequence. When members raise specific issues and relate to these, I shall ask Steve or Shona to confirm whether these are competent to be considered at this stage of the proceedings. Before we proceed to consider these, can I ask members to note that there is a minor factual correction to the paper at page 126 under issue 11. And Steve Rogers and Shona McCoy are here to respond to any questions members may have on the report. So I'm going to now open the meeting up to members' debate. And can we deal with the minor factual error first, and then I'll go on to consideration of the issues.
Yes, thank you, Leader, and good afternoon, members. Yes, there is a minor factual correction to be made to the papers that were circulated. It's on page 132 and involves the deletion of part of a sentence. If you could just turn to page 132. The wording begins, "It adjoins Remembrance Park," and essentially that part of the sentence has to be deleted, as it is actually factually inaccurate. It doesn't change the basis of the suggested response, which remains that there are more suitable sites identified elsewhere within Lockerbie, and that this particular site is actually designated as protected open space.
So how would that sentence read with the deletion?
So I'll just read the revised sentence with the deletion included in it. So the sentence should actually read, the site is not considered suitable for development as there is a generous supply of effective housing land on more preferable sites in Lockerbie.
Thanks.
The other minor error in the papers as well, Leader, to point out is that issues 14A and 14B, statutory housing market area, are wrongly titled in the papers, and they, as issue 16A and B on pages 182 to 203. So where you see the reference in the published papers to issues 16A and B, it should actually read 14A and B. But that's also picked up by the index that we've circulated to all members just to help with the navigation of Appendix 1 to the report.
Thanks, Steve. Okay. Councillor James.
Thank you, Leader. Apologies for not reacting quickly enough when you asked for declarations of interest. I have made a representation to H4 as a private individual. Of course, I won't speak to that. I'm a part owner of one of the development sites, DBT H6, and I won't involve myself in debate surrounding that. Similarly, I know people involved in DFS H255 on both sides of the argument, so I think I'll distance myself from that. And in Crossmichael, I facilitated the drawing of the boundary there, so I think it'd be inappropriate if I commented on that either. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor James. Can we now turn to any issues? Issue number 1, the introduction, LDP, vision and spatial strategy, which are on pages 7 to 29 of the committee report. Councillor Carruthers.
Thanks, Leader. It's not particular on that point. I just wonder procedurally, in regards to, I wonder if we could outline just exactly what we can and can't do today. So I wonder if that's a possibility either for yourself or Steve or somebody like that.
So ask Steve to give clarification on that, yeah.
Yes, Leader. I mean, today really is an important point in the ongoing process of the Local Development Plan 2, and we've included at the back as Appendix 5 just a reminder of where we are in the process, which is that having begun this process back in November 2015, there's been a significant amount of community engagement and public consultation and neighbour notification, first of all in connection with the main issues report, which set out all of our proposed policies and sites, before we then considered, as the Leader has already made reference to, the proposed plan in January of this year. So really the purpose of today is to consider the outcome of that proposed plan stage and to agree to the proposed response that's set out in Appendix 1 to all the points of representation that have been made and submitted to us. It's really now at this point for us to hand those across to the reporter in order to conduct the independent examination of the plan, and in particular to focus in on all of those unresolved objections to the proposed plan. So it's not really at this point in time for the council to make decisions about those submitted objections, but rather to pass them across to the examination process so that members of the public can be reassured and developers and landowners can be reassured that their submitted comments are being reviewed independently, so the council is not seen as being judge and jury of its own plan. After the examination process is finished, we'll receive a report from the reporter containing a number of recommendations, Now, those recommendations are all binding on the council, and the recommendations can and do cover everything from modifications and changes to policies, to modifications and changes to sites, sites coming in, sites coming out. Those members that were here and were involved in the process surrounding the current adopted local development plan will probably remember that when we received the reporter's report the last time around, there were a number of changes that the reporter required us to make to the plan before we were allowed then to go on and adopt it.
Councillor Carruthers?
So I suppose there's a couple of points here in regards to, because we've got about, I think, 8 points. Some's maybe just one's maybe just a question in general terms to try and get further clarification on a particular site allocated in the Noble Hill area, how that may progress or not. I think the rest is pretty much about site allocations and how they work. And so there's some, we might have a view that actually there's some merit in some of the representations that have been put forward. So what we're thinking is just how do we actually, so it's quite clear when we get to those points in times, if we've got particular points we'd like to raise, maybe we do support the merits of the, I know we can't go back, well, if we do go back, the information we've got, if we do go back and reallocate a site, then there's a cause and effect in there, and actually we'd have to go out and reconsult, and it could take up to another year. So it would, I don't think there's an appetite for that at all, Leader, knocking this process back for a year. But I think there's an appetite to actually say, okay, some of the points that have been made are relevant from the representations, and actually it's whether we actually support those or whether we actually think that there's actually some merits in them. So we just want to be absolutely clear how we get a chance at this point to put our points across, Leader.
Yes, thank you, Leader. The report does in fact contain a list of all of the representations that we're suggesting have got some merit to them. So if you look at Appendix 2, then Appendix 2 is a composite list of all of those representations that we are recommending to members this afternoon could in some shape or form be accepted, and that we would indicate to the reporter that we would be minded to agree to some changes or modifications to the plan. But ultimately, the decision on that rests with the reporter and not with ourselves. All we're doing is simply indicating the council's position. We do not have the power to make changes ourselves to the plan.
I think I suppose it's how significant a difference that we can recommend. So if somebody, for example, wanted to include a site which we had previously not included, we would not at this stage be able to say we agree with the inclusion of the site.
I think, Leader, if I could refer to there is a paragraph in the covering report which specifically deals with this issue, which is paragraph 3.4.4. And essentially the position really from the government guidance is that, first of all, Scottish ministers expect the authority's priority to be to progress to adoption of the plan as quickly as possible, and that pre-examination negotiations and notifiable modifications which can cause significant delay should not be undertaken as a matter of course. It then goes on to say that the examination itself provides an opportunity to change the plan. So if authorities see merit in a representation, they may say so in their response to the reporter. So that's the purpose of Appendix 2. This is the list of 50 so representations that we're suggesting that there is some merit in what's being said here, and therefore we would be minded, should the reporter make a recommendation to change the plan, then essentially we are indicating that would be fine with us. However, they then go on to say that if authorities wish to support a significant change to the plan, especially one that would entail further notification, further neighbour notification, this should be done by means of pre-examination pre-examination modification. In other words, what they mean by significant is either adding a site or deleting a site, or adding a policy or deleting a policy. If we are minded to want to do that, what they're saying is you actually need to go back a stage and start again with your proposed plan. So it would take us back to where we were this time last year, effectively.
Well, thanks for that, Leader. I mean, I think we're beyond that point. We don't think it's an appetite, is what I'm saying, certainly for our group. Don't think it's an appetite to go back and revisit, set it back a year. We'll revisit in 5 years, but there is an appetite there to make sure that we think that some of the representations are valid and proper, and that actually we maybe could point them in the direction of the reporter to actually think that is a strong case within what the argument that's been put forward. There's maybe another one slightly as well, as what's notifiable and what's not non-notifiable. I mean, for example, I'll use as an example so we can relate to page 148. It talks about a slight boundary change, I think, potentially being asked for. So if you go to page 148, it's contained within there. I've noted it as being 119.003 is the reference, for what I can see. And for what I can gather, that would probably, it looks like probably a non-notifiable. It's something that could actually be achieved here, but as we discussed that, so that would probably one of the points we'd ask, is that a non-notifiable? Is that something potentially, from our perspective, we could see actually we do support the argument?
We should look at that when we come to that issue, and then Steve will be able to give us advice, as I say, issue by issue, as to whether or not that would be notifiable or non-notifiable. Councillor Hagman.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I'm just looking for sort of a point of clarification. As a council, we want to be as open and transparent as possible, and this is a long process, and we've been consulting with that. Can I ask how are we feeding back to those that have made representations on this? Are everybody that submitted, and I appreciate that we've actually got half the amount of representations as what we had last time, so that in itself is a really good indication that we've done a good job with this, I feel. But how are we actually going to feed back to all the people that have put in representations? Are we going to notify them of the results of this meeting, or will they get individual letters? What's the process so everybody knows how they've actually impacted in this process?
Yes, Leader, we do notify everybody that's made a representation of what's happening, and we sent messages, we sent emails and letters out to everybody to tell them that it was coming to this meeting, and again there would be further communication from the Scottish Government Reporters Unit as part of the examination process to let them know that their representations are being considered as part of the examination. So there is ongoing communication between ourselves and all parties to the plan. We also put information out on the website in the form of our development plan scheme, which provides a complete update on where we are in the process and most importantly, what's happening next, and providing advice on how people can get involved in the process. Shona, is there anything you want to add?
Well, if full council agree today that we can submit for examination, we then send it off to the Department of Planning and Environmental Appeals. And once it's gone off there, we will then notify everyone who's made a representation that that's what's happened. After that, all the notifications are then dealt with by the department, the DPEA for short. So they then deal with it all. And we then become almost like the representor, that if the reporter wants any further information, they get in touch with the council separately, as they will do with the representative. So it gets handed over.
There's perhaps, Leader, worth adding, as we're on that point, that the reporters unit will receive full details of every single representation made. So what members have in front of them today is by necessity a summary of all the representations, because if you wanted to see all of them, they take up 7 complete A4 ring binders in Shona's team's office. And part of our job is to summarise those down into a form that's digestible for the public and for members. But the reporters unit will have access to the full original text of all of the submitted representations.
Yeah, so objectors can be reassured that the reporter will receive everything and all their arguments in regard to the different sites and so on. Okay, should we go to issue 1 again? Introduction, LDP vision and spatial strategy. Has anybody... Okay, Stephen, Councillor Thompson. Oh, sorry, and Councillor Levy.
Apologies, I've not used my technology properly. Just a quick question on the material weight of the LDP2 at this stage, because often in the run-up to LDP1, members of the Planning Committee were often advised that there would be some material weight given to the LDP, even though it hadn't yet been adopted, and that was a kind of, I suppose, left to the judgment of members. But given that we're approaching LDP2 adoption, and depending on what we decide today, will that have some material, or should it be considered with some material weight in terms of the Planning Committee?
Leader, the material weight that can be given to the what is referred to as the emerging development plan gets greater the closer we get to adoption. But really the key stage that we have to get through in the process before much weight can be given to it is the examination, because until we know the outcome of the examination, we don't know for certain what the content of the plan will be. So in particular, any policies or sites which are the subject of objection, those objections have to go through that independent examination process. So we could not really give any weight to those within LDP2 until we get past the examination process. If there are sites and policies in LDP2 that have not attracted objections, then they are not now going to change, and therefore we can give them weight in the process of determining a planning application. So it depends whether, it depends on the status of that particular site or that particular policy when we receive a planning application.
Thank you.
Councillor Levy?
I don't know whether we've moved on, but in 3.5.1, it says the minor modifications are set out in Appendix 1. In actual fact, they are set out in Appendix 2, so I think there's a typo in the text.
No, I think they are set out in Appendix 1, aren't they not? Yes, it's correct. Okay, third time lucky. Shall we move on to issue 1, please? Which is on pages 7 to 29. Anybody got any issues to raise? Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Leader. It's on the back of what Councillor Thompson's mentioned about how much weight will be attached to LDB2. It's obviously in relation to page 70. I think Steve was referring to sites that have been allocated, and this is a site that we removed.
Councillor Johnson, we're not actually up onto that issue yet.
It's backing up what Stephen Thompson was saying.
Oh, right, okay.
It was just really clarity to see if it worked in both directions, that's all, whether it's for sites removed or sites added.
Well, yes, the answer to that would be yes. It's any change to the plan, any anticipated change as well as a result of the examination process. We cannot give any weight to the LDP2 until we've been through the examination process in relation to sites of that nature.
Okay. Right. Okay. Issue 1. Anybody? Any representations? Comments on issue 1, the introduction LDP vision and spatial strategy committee report, pages 7 to 29. Okay. Issue 2 is the overarching policies. They're on pages 30 to 35. Any representations on those? Or comments on those? Right, then issue 3 is economic development policies. They're contained on pages 36 to 47. Issue 4, housing policies, pages 48 to 54. Right, okay, Ian. Sorry, Councillor Crowther.
That's fine. Thank you, Leader. Just in regards to the representation that has been put forward there in page 71, sorry. So maybe just get to that. We just think there's merit in that, Leader. We just so come back to the correct level of wording. Let me just find it. It's by Councillor David James. Well, it's David James. It's a personal thing. Sorry. Am I
Sorry,
ahead again?
what could you give a reference to the page, please?
I think it's 71. I think. Just let me find it. Oh no, I'm ahead again.
I think
Sorry,
I think you're ahead of yourself.
I am ahead of myself.
Okay.
I think it's page 52, Leader.
And there's quite a lot of different policies before we come to the specific sites and so on.
Have I missed it?
Issue number 5 is historic environment policies, which is pages 55 to 60.
Apologies, I meant to say 52. I don't know why I said 71.
Oh, sorry, it was page 52.
It was, sorry.
Okay.
I've just got my notes wrong there. Just let me find it. I've got it labelled here. And it refers to it's 066.002. We just again with this, it's been discussed previously. So in order to probably set a precedent in regards to how we go on, but we felt there was merit in regards to that argument that's been put forward. So how would we support that? Do you think as we go forward? I mean, I think we would propose that there is merit in regards to that argument round about the settlement boundaries, that particular policy. It's contained within the arguments put forward and responses there, but we feel the argument is strong enough to support in whichever way we can, and could we possibly point the reporter in that direction. That's what we would propose, Leader.
I see in the response from our officers was that there hadn't been information to explain what they meant by important, specific and very localised demand. Do you want to expand on that at all, Steve, in terms of your response to that?
Yes, thank you, Leader. I think it's worthwhile as well, considering the response that's set out to the point below as well, because between the two of them, it covers this issue, which is effectively that there is no monitoring of the housing land supply other than at the level of the housing market area, because that is what's required by the Scottish Government and by the circular. So there is no mechanism in place to determine whether there is a sufficient supply of effective housing land at the level of the individual settlement, because the planning building block that we use for matching supply and demand of housing is the housing market area as required by Scottish Government and as set out in the housing needs and demands assessment that forms the underpin to the housing land allocation figures.
I think as part of our previous discussions and arguments and such like, it was put forward, a couple of sites were referred to, but we're of the understanding that that level of information could be drilled down to the district centres. And it's not just the 6 housing market areas. So that level of information is there, and there can be an identified local need. That's certainly what we've heard in previous discussions, certainly, that level of information could be gained and gleaned. So if that information was there, we think it's important. And I think we referred to previously a site in Closeburn, maybe, where there was an identified local need, but because such a large allocation in Dumfries in regards to that, it absorbed that and took away from it. We said Dumfries is such a large housing market area. I think we referred to Moffat as well, maybe, where it comes under the same housing market area. So there will be a need in Moffat, even Lochmaben, there will be a need in Lochmaben, but it's the level of allocation. So adjacent to a particular settlement boundary, I think that's the argument that's been put forward, is that so that level of information, if it's not, it certainly should be. We should identify that district need, but we would understand that level of information is actually there and can be identified, Leader.
Well, Leader, just to reiterate what I said before, we do not have monitoring arrangements in place to identify housing land supply and demand at the level of the individual settlement. The planning building block is the housing market area. I think following on from the discussion at the council meeting in January, we did undertake to investigate to see if it would be possible to look at it on a settlement basis, and I think the written advice that I circulated to all members at the time was to explain that that wasn't possible, and that in fact the government required us to do it at a housing market area, and that's why everything has been set up to monitor supply and demand at a housing market area level.
Are you content with that explanation?
I'm not content because I believe that information will be there if we drill into it, and it discriminates a large urban settlement like Dumfries discriminates against large smaller settlements like the Moffat, Lochbabe, Closeburn, even down as far as small building groups if it comes to it, and that overwhelming allocation, you could say, in comparison to the smaller settlements, is a detriment to their chance as an area community to expand and grow.
So are you wanting to put forward a motion to that effect?
I think, well, see, that's the point I'm trying to get to, Leader, is that I think we do believe there's merit in it, and that information could be there. So there's merit in the argument. I've maybe added to further what's actually contained within the paper, and I would certainly propose a move that we actually do. Again, it comes back to the wording. We know we can't change. We've made a decision, like I say, we're content with it. There's not an appetite to go back and revisit challenge to the point where we change the plan and have to go back out to consultation. But we do support the principle of what's being said within there, and I've added to that, Leader. And I would move that.
So you're proposing that...
Yeah. That I suppose we would ask the Scottish Government to look at this and say there actually is merit in regards to this actual argument that's been put forward. That's all we're asking. We're not asking for, so that will not be a material change to the plan as it goes forward. It's quite simple. Will the Scottish Government recognise that we feel that there is actually merit within this argument that's been put forward?
Would that constitute a material change to the policy?
No, Leader, I don't believe that would be a material change. I think that would be a non-material variation.
In that case, we could move to a vote on that. Assuming that, unless everybody wishes to agree that.
Before I give that, could I unusually ask the Leader if I could ask Steve a question, please? Is it that the Scottish Government are saying we must use housing market areas? Because if it is, if we must use them, then it wouldn't be a competent motion.
The advice is contained within Scottish planning policy and within one of the planning circulars that we must plan on the basis of housing market areas. So therefore there has been no requirement for us to go down to an individual settlement level. I think perhaps where we need to be a little bit careful here is that at an individual settlement level, then we do hear arguments advanced about providing local choice and local flexibility in terms of housing land availability. Now that would be a matter for an applicant for planning permission to put that case forward or to put that argument forward as part of an application for planning permission, but it's not really something that can be covered in terms of a policy.
Leader, is it okay if I just make a point?
Yeah. Then we could separately lobby the government for a change in that policy, but it would appear to me at the moment, from the advice we've had from the head of planning, that at the moment we are required to plan on that basis, and if we wish to change that, we'd probably need to persuade the government to make the change.
No, thanks I appreciate your advice, Leader, and take it on board. I would also put that we've looked at housing, we've had a housing needs demands assessment. It does drill into the district centres. We've been told that information is there, and if it is explicit, what Steve's saying, it's contained within the guidance provided for Scottish Government. It has to be a housing market area. Then we find us all in a difficult area. I would agree that that's right. It would be incompetent that I put forward, but we have got that level of information through the housing needs and demands assessment, and I would feel for that reason it was competent, but I'm not going to die in a ditch over it, Leader.
I think to be helpful, that I think all members would like to work at the lowest possible level, because it's obviously the communities that we're interested in. So I wonder if members are minded that I think it doesn't fit quite into the LDP, but if members are minded, I'd be happy to arrange a meeting with the Chief Planner to discuss what would be possible, so that we could then come back perhaps for a lobbying position for this council, but informed with that technical discussion, So we come back having informed discussion, and then we might lobby and write directly to the Scottish Government following a meeting with the Chief Planner. Because I think at the moment we're working in the policy framework that exists, but I think for members to lobby possible, you need to know what the art of the possible is. So if members are minded, I'd be happy to have a meeting with Steve, with the Chief Planner, to discuss what would be possible and bring an appropriate motion back for members.
You content with that? Excellent. We were on historic environment policies 55 to 60. Anything on that? Okay. Natural environment policies are page 61 to 69. Community services and facilities policies, pages 70 to 80. Councillor Crothers.
Leader, it's maybe been covered already. It was just in regards to, maybe Councillor Johnston will emphasise on this one. It was page 71. It was the Noble Hill in particular. We were interested in regards to, again, which Councillor Thompson and Johnston have already touched on, the amount of weight that, under the current circumstances, the amount of weight that the actual new proposed plan. And the one point I suppose Steve hasn't touched on, if Councillor Johnson hasn't got anything to add to what I'm going to say, but is when the examination process finishes, because obviously that's when a material point in time. So I'd be interested if Councillor Johnson hasn't got anything to add to. He was kind of leading this from our group perspective, Leader, if that's okay, but that one point in particular, when does the examination process become a material point in time?
Well, my understanding is that it can take 6 to 9 months, and then the plan will be sent back to us to adopt it as required by the reporter. Am I correct? So.
Yes, Leader, that's correct. I mean, the examination process effectively comes to an end when we receive the reporter's report on the examination, which will contain all their recommendations. That can take up to 6 months from start to finish. I think experience last time was that it took 6 months. So we've allowed for a 6-month period again this time.
Councillor Hislop.
Just getting back to this sort of point, if we have a site that is in the current LDP but is to be taken out of a future one, would we accept a planning application on the current one, or would we assist that application till we've had the examination of the next one? I'm thinking back to when we sat here and did structured plans in 1999 and local plans subsequent to that. I think it started in 2003, it might have finished in about 2007 or something like that. We assisted applications when they were contrary to the upcoming plan, if they were all right within the existing one. Would we do that currently on any planning applications that come in?
Steve?
Leader, well, currently we have adopted local development plan. So legally, we're required to, and the Planning Applications Committee is required to take decisions in line with the adopted local development plan. What the legislation then goes on to say is unless material considerations determine otherwise. So a material consideration as we start to go through the LDP2 process towards adoption is the emerging LDP2. So if there is a contradiction between the two, then as we get closer towards adopting LDP2, we can give more and more weight to it, and then it becomes a matter of judgment for the decision makers as to how much weight finally to give to it, being mindful of the fact that we still have an adopted local development plan, so there would have to be a very strong case to set that aside and base the decision on the emerging LDP2.
But we were sort of advised earlier that until the examination goes through, you wouldn't put much weight to this. So therefore, are you saying if I had a site in just now, I could put that application in and get it through, although it's contrary to the next plan?
Yes, as things stand at this point in time, we have an adopted local development plan, and emerging LDP2, I would suggest, is too early in its process to give much weight to it as a material consideration. So a planning application would have to be determined on the basis of what's in the adopted local development plan.
Okay, so anything else in issue 7? No. Issue 8, infrastructure policies, 82 to 109. Okay. Nothing in that then. Transport policies, 110 to 114. Nobody? Okay, then we move on to issue 10, which is the Annan housing market area. Councillor Carruthers.
Thanks, Leila. Just a small one, but it's page 117. It refers to ANN.H203. Again, just going back to the previous comments, that was a small, very small piece of land that we included. It was out with the settlement boundary, but it fitted in nicely. And we realigned the settlement boundary, but rather than classify it the same designation as the surrounding land, we redesignated it as white land, which I don't really understand fully for why. There is certainly text here that explains, because of maybe infrastructure in regards to pylons, that the white land in each case as it comes forward in its own merits. But I think to be consistent, maybe we should certainly we should point the reporter in the direction that actually this would sit more naturally. I think that there's merit in regards to the arguments put forward. That it's actually residential, like the rest, I think, is what's been said. If you read it at the fuller level of representation, it's just a small piece, but I think it's important that we at least, it's one of the bits certainly has been highlighted to me, and I'd actually picked up on myself anyway. So it's quite a simple request. We look at Georgetown. It'd be similar to that. Obviously, there's overhead cabling and such like power cables there, but there's houses everywhere. There's no gaps or anything like that. So just in regards to taking a consistent approach, Leader, I think that the argument deserves merit.
Councillor Brodie, is it the same issue?
It's the same item there. There's a bit of clarification there. The reason this site is not included is because of the electricity pylons and high voltage electricity route. Just clarification: if the owner was to come up with a plan to overcome this and make it viable, would the planning application be considered?
Well, Leader, yes. The reason that this site was not recommended for inclusion as an allocated site is that it's not considered to be an effective site because of these significant constraints that impact on it. It would be really for the developer to come back as part of a future planning application, given that it is within the settlement boundary, so therefore it is a white land site. It would be open for the developer to come back and demonstrate that those constraints could be overcome. This site was considered as part of the previous LDP process. Exactly the same issue arose, and the reporter the last time round recommended that the site at that time should not be included as an allocated site because there was no evidence that those significant constraints could be overcome, and nothing really has changed in the meantime.
So a developer could come forward so long as they could solve the problem, and they could still submit a planning application on the LDB2 if they were able to demonstrate that they had solved the constraints. Okay. Anything else on Annan housing market area? No. Okay, the Dumfries housing market area, general and district and local centres, 128 to 146. Councillor Carruthers.
Leader, again, just the same argument. I think it's page 130. Again, just look at the representations that have come forward. It says page 130, and it's allocation LMB.H2, for what I can see, Laverick Hall. there's been arguments for and against. Well, it's not, I think one's for and one's about access or something like that. It's probably more about site design, but by the looks of it, I didn't fully understand it. But I suppose we had this discussion previously at the council, full council meeting then, but it's no allocations is what it's saying within the representation for any housing other than windfall settlements within Lochmaben. Consider this, Steve, the road infrastructure constraints seem to be perceived from what the road officer is saying. There is actually technical solutions to that. It is identified, this site's actually identified within Dumfries and Galloway Council's strategic housing investment plan, so we've actually supported from a different somewhere else, but within the council. It's for affordable housing, through what I can gather from the representation that's been made. So, I mean, we felt there was merit in regards to the arguments that were put forward. So, again, going back to what we said earlier, actually there is merit. It's again, it comes back to, I think it was, we allocated it as white land, kept it within the settlement boundary, similar to the previous one. But I absolutely think, well, there's, in comparison to other similar settlements, size and scale, it seems that because there's absolutely nothing allocated for Lochmaben at all, it'd be it's unfair in regards to them, in regards to affordable housing, to be able to expand and grow. So I'll leave it at that, Leader, but we certainly think there's merit within the arguments put forward.
Councillor Wilson.
Sorry, can we just get clarification? I was under the impression that this site had actually been removed from the Strategic Housing Investment Partnership last year, sort of November Communities Committee, I think it was.
Is anybody able to clarify if that's the case?
We can certainly double check that. There is a report on the Strategic Housing Investment Plan that's due to be going to Communities Committee on the 6th of September. So we will just double check to see if this site is included within that report, or if there's any reference in that report to the site. I think the allocation of the site within the LDP, or certainly the fact that it's within the settlement boundary, would not preclude its development for affordable or any other type of housing, provided the developer was to advance a justification to us as to why it was necessary.
I presume that this is similar to the previous case, where if a potential developer was able to prove that the access issues had been addressed, as it's white land, they would be able to bring a planning application forward.
Yes, it's certainly Leader open to a developer to do that. There is reference in Appendix 2 of the report that's going to Communities Committee on the 6th to Laverock Hall, Lochmaben, as having a capacity of 10 units within the Strategic Housing Investment Plan. So I would suggest perhaps members may need to raise that issue, that particular issue, with our colleagues in housing, preferably in advance of the Communities Committee meeting on Thursday.
Councillor Crothers?
Actually, I read it from the report that it said it was in the ship, so I just took it at face value that it was. But certainly, I would propose, Leader, that it has got, the argument has got merit, if we can accept that as a proposal, certainly. I do think that in comparison to other settlements, the argument's been made. I do, but I mean, the current, it was touched upon earlier, we have a current local development plan. Its status in that one is actually current, so it is an allocated site within that plan. After, depending on the examination process, it may or may not be in, but again, looking at the sake of affordable housing, and down to district level, we just felt it was an argument, because not only is there not affordable housing in that area allocated, there's no housing at all in that area, so without, there's nothing else, certainly what I'm aware of, has come forward and proposed.
My instinct is that this is covered by 3.4, and because this would be effectively suggesting we put a site back into the plan, and therefore we would have to go back round consultation again if we did that.
No, so I'm absolutely clear that I'm not proposing, we've went through that, we're beyond that argument, so that's away going. I'm not looking to revisit this. All I'm saying is that we believe that there's merit in the argument, that's all. That's all we're asking the Scottish Government to say, that if the Council's viewpoint is there's absolute merit within the argument, that's all I'm asking for. I'm not looking to go back and rewind and set this process back a year or anything like that. So, not looking to change, not making a motion to change things, just actually to point out to the Scottish Government actually there is merit within this argument.
Councillor Nicholson?
So that's Councillor Connors saying that we should go, it's the same as last time, we should maybe get the plans together and have a look at see how we can accept, see if we can put pressure on the Scottish Government to change their policy. Or is it something that Whiteland here just now, I think Steve's saying that you can actually go and you can put forward a plan, and at the moment it might not be accepted, but you can still put forward.
Yeah, on my own side, particularly if there's a demonstration the access issues have been addressed, they would be able to, there would be potentially a planning application could be accepted if the access issues were accepted, were addressed. Yeah. Okay,
And that was in regards to a policy Councillor Nicholson referred to. There's no correlation between the two. This is an allocated site, currently in the local development plan, and it's, as it says within the report, it's there in text that I think the roads constraints are perceived, which is understandable. If you go anywhere by that site, it does look as if there's certainly road constraints there. It does look a difficult site to access, but the roads officials are of a different view.
Councillor Wilson?
Sorry, Leader. Just to confirm that I have managed to go back to that Communities Committee, and it says that Laverick Hall was removed from the SHIP at that 5th of September 2017 Communities Committee meeting, so it isn't actually in the SHIP.
Looks a bit like there might be a mistake in the community's papers coming up then.
So it is actually removed at that meeting.
We'll certainly take that up with our colleagues in housing, but that's not the information that we have, and it's not the information that's contained in the report that's going on Thursday. We'll certainly take it up with our colleagues.
Councillor Ferguson.
Thanks. Actually, Steve just offered to do what I was going to ask him to do, so that's fine. And we'll deal with that before Thursday's Communities Committee, whichever way it needs to be dealt with. Thank you.
Okay, so could I ask your advice with regard to Councillor Carruthers' proposal? Because my interpretation would be that we would not be able to support that representation without going back out for consultation again.
Well, Leader, yes, the representation says, in terms of the change that is being sought, allocate the site for housing. So we would certainly need to avoid, if we don't want to go round the whole loop of putting sites back in and having to turn the clock back 12 months. We would need to avoid indicating that we supported the allocation of the site for housing, notwithstanding obviously the comments that Councillor Carruthers has made. It would be a matter for the council as a whole to take a view on whether we could support, whether the council felt it wanted to support the case, but without going that step further in terms of asking specifically for the site to be reintroduced or allocated again for housing.
I'm a bit confused as to what you're able to do now, actually, because you say we can't support putting it back in, but we can say something else about it.
When asked advice, what can we do and what can we not do? And I thought we got it back quite clearly. If we expressed that there's actually, we feel that there may be merit in the case, and that's as far as I don't think we could really go beyond that. And that's all I'm trying to say is that there's merit within the case, the argument that's been put forward. I'm not asking for it to be changed. We're beyond that point in time. I think we're way beyond it. We've had that discussion, had the argument, and I'll say that again. I'll say it again and say it again if it comes to it. But it's just to do whether we support if there's any principle in regards to their argument. I believe there is, and I've outlined why.
Councillor Nicholson?
Does that mean, I'm confused as well now, because does it mean that, for example, Parkhead site, it's in the LDP one, could we write and then say, right, we support it, even though it's not against the, it's, because LDP, it's in the LDP1, could we then now say that we support Parkhead site? If so, I'm quite willing to move that.
Well, no, Leader, on that specific one, we would not be able to do anything on that because there have been no representations received at this stage. That previous discussion was in connection with the formulation of the proposed plan, but because we haven't received any objections to the site being deleted, there is nothing for us to respond to.
Councillor Hagman and Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Leader. I'm just looking for some clarification on this one because I'm looking at the minute from January and I've got it in front of me and it refers to discussion with members in October 2017, and the last paragraph on that minute, as I say, from January on page 7, it says if the site were to be removed from the LDP2, there'd be no housing allocations, and it goes on to that. There's no indication on this that it was removed. I'm just looking for clarification. What was the decision made? Because this site was actually specifically discussed in January, but I'm looking at the minute of the meeting from January and I can't actually see any clarification as to what we decided. So could I have clarification on that?
Leader, yes, the decision was that the site should be deleted from LDP2. So when we published the proposed plan for consultation, it did not contain the Laverock Hall site.
Councillor Ferguson.
Thanks, and I'm just kind of wanting some clarification here again from Steve, if I can, through you, Leader. The two separate processes here, yes, they work together, but they're separate processes. The SHIP is what we agreed to invest in. This process is what's potential for anybody out there to look at. Am I getting that right? Yeah, there's two very separate processes here. They're not necessarily linked.
Well, yes, there are two separate processes, but there is a link between them in that the sites that come forward through the Strategic Housing Investment Programme, which is the basis on which the council draws down money, and RSLs draw down money from Scottish Government to support the provision of affordable housing. It's important that those sites are deliverable, and part of the assessment of those sites being deliverable is the planning status of them.
So, Councillor Crothers, I mean, have you got a proposal which would not
absolutely,
which would be
Leader.
acceptable?
Like I said before, so I'm absolutely clear. I would formally move that we, as a council, provided the wording's correct, that we support that there's merit in regards to the arguments being put forward in regards to that, and that's it. It's no further. We're not asking to reallocate a site. We're not saying we want to support the site directly as it was, as per its allocated designation at the moment. But I think there's support that we have affordable housing in Lochmaben. That's the principle. Leader, do we support affordable housing in Lochmaben as per the allocated site? I suppose is what goes through my mind when I think about it. But the proposal is absolutely for the council supports the merit of the argument.
I think to try to be helpful, I think we're trying to avoid us taking a decision that puts something in and something out. But if members feel there may be merit in here, because I think we're trying to avoid is the job of the reporter is actually to assess all the other bids and schemes around it and put this in context. You're not in a position to do that without reopening. And I think that, Councillor, my advice would be not to use words particularly support too much because it does sound like approve and you haven't got the full thing sitting in front of you. But actually, for the council to agree there may be merit in this consideration adds weight for the reporter's consideration. So when the reporter considers it around and he sees the council believes there may be merit in this, because otherwise, I would have to say any stronger words. You don't have it all sitting in front of you with the full thing and in every other possible site in that area. But that's what the reporter's going to do. So I would support Councillor Carruthers in using words like the council believes that there may be merit, there is merit, maybe for members to decide those words. But I think when you move towards support and beyond, that means you've sat considering it in the round, and we're not at this point. That was the last bit of the process. But certainly, as the reporter, if I saw the words, the council believes there is merit in this representation, then that may add weight for his considerations when he considers it in the total round. But we're not approving another one in or out, but actually at this last stage have said that there is or maybe merit. If that's helpful, Leader.
Councillor Driver and Councillor Wilson.
Thanks very much for it. It was really good to get the Chief Exec's thing up, because I was feeling this was becoming the hokey-cokey LDP. It was in, out and shake it all about. I think there's merit in what he actually says, in that the council may see some merit in putting this in. However, it's already been taken out, So I think there's an opportunity for Councillor Carruthers to write to the reporter and say that as an individual or as a group, whatever he wants to do. But I think we need to go with this particular plan because we've already made that decision to take it out in January.
Councillor Wilson.
Sorry, I was just going to propose that we don't follow that and we go for the recommendation there that it's no modification to the proposed plan, and that we don't support or whatever terminology you want to use.
Yeah. Would you want to repeat that, Stephen?
I appreciate that it's stating to the reporter the obvious of what he or she's to do, but I wonder if we just said that the council asked the reporter to consider the merits in this in detail. So we're not saying that for any of the others really, but that shows that we maybe do think there is something in it without saying we support it.
Thanks, Rona. I'm not sure that actually reflects the views of the entire council.
I mean, it'd be helpful for your advice, Rona, but certainly my view is that there's not merit in this, and that we shouldn't be saying that to the Scottish Government.
Councillor Carruthers?
So whether it's Rona language or beliefs, I think the council believes there is merit in this argument. It's quite a simple forward. The case that's been put forward is a simple way of putting it. It doesn't overstep the line in regards to we're actually reallocating this site in any way, shape or form. I would move that, Leader.
Mm-hmm. Councillor Ferguson?
It's the governance question. This does it meet the 6-month rule for overturning a previous council decision?
We're not making a decision.
It is actually more than 6 months. But, well, we have a proposal from Councillor Wilson, seconded by Councillor Driver, that we accept what is suggested by our officers as our response. Councillor Carruthers, you have an amendment suggesting that we should...
That there may be merit.
That there may be merit. Do you have a second?
The council thinks there may be merit.
Yeah, okay, do you have a seconder?
Happy to second, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Nicholl. Okay, I think we just go to a vote now. I think we've discussed it enough.
I asked a question, I didn't hear the answer. Does it meet the 6-month test to bringing something back to full council?
Well, I don't know.
If we're moving to a vote, we respect.
But it is actually it is more than 6 months. Yeah, it was January that we took the decision on the LDB2 before we put it out to consultation. So it is over 6 months. Councillor Marshall.
I don't believe we are changing the recommendation. I think the whole basis on that there's a perception that there's a little bit of merit in this. So it's not changing the decision that we took, I don't think. I think it's just making a comment that there is merit.
Proceed to the vote anyhow.
Okay. Leader?
Motion.
Deputy Leader?
Motion.
Councillor Blake?
Motion.
Councillor Brodie?
Amendment.
Councillor Dougie Campbell?
Motion.
Councillor John Campbell?
Motion.
Councillor Carruthers?
Amendment.
Councillor Karen Carruthers? Councillor Dryborough?
Motion.
Councillor Fairbairn?
Amendment.
Councillor Ferguson?
Motion.
Councillor Gilroy?
Amendment.
Councillor Hagman?
Motion.
Councillor Howie?
Amendment.
Councillor Hislop? Councillor Ingalls?
Amendment.
Councillor James?
Amendment.
Councillor Johnston?
Amendment.
Councillor Lever?
Motion.
Councillor Little?
Motion.
Councillor Marshall?
Abstain.
Councillor Martin?
Motion.
Councillor McClelland?
Abstain.
Councillor McComb?
Motion.
Councillor McKee?
Motion.
Councillor Nicholl,
Amendment.
Councillor Nicholson,
Motion.
Councillor Ronnie,
Amendment.
Councillor Scobie,
Motion.
Councillor Sloan,
Motion.
Councillor Stitt,
Motion.
Councillor Tate, Councillor Thompson,
Motion.
Councillor Wilson,
Motion.
Councillor Wood, Councillor Young.
Motion.
The motion is carried by 20 votes to 13 with 3 abstentions.
Thank you, Rona. Is there anything else in issue 11, the Dumfries housing market area, general and district and local centres? Any other specific issues in there? Okay, can we move on to Dumfries Town? That's general settlement, boundary, housing and B&I sites on pages 147 to 170. Councillor Hislop.
Thank you, Leader. It's with regard to the one mentioned earlier on page 148, settlement boundary. I think the representation's asking for the garden to be included in the actual settlement. I think that's a factual change. The garden is part of the property. Most maps that we do have the garden within the defined settlement boundary, and as a sort of factual change, I think it would be a non-notifiable change, and I would like to thought we could have changed that boundary to reflect the situation on the ground.
It does strike me as a slightly curious situation. Steve, can you give us further advice on this? It sort of seems a little odd that somebody's garden should be excluded from the settlement boundary.
Yes, well, Leader, first point to make is that the settlement boundary does not necessarily follow land ownership. So what might be a common sense or sensible definition to the edge of the built-up area in physical terms might not always align with land ownership. And so that explains why in this particular case the settlement boundary bisects land ownership issue. And that's also why we're recommending in our paper that there should be no change to that. The reporter at LDP, at this stage of the LDP last time round, also considered this issue, and as part of the report last time round recommended that there should be no adjustment made to the settlement boundary, and our view is that there hasn't been any change in circumstances since then, so that should continue to be the case.
What risk would there be, though, if in changing them in terms of
It would be non-notifiable.
It would be non-notifiable, yes, so there's no risk in changing it.
No.
Councillor Hislop?
As such, could I move that we include the garden ground as detailed in 119.003?
Do you have any objections to that? Can we unanimously decide that modification is made as it's non-notifiable? Thanks. Okay. Anything else on issue 11, Dumfries Housing Market Association? Councillor Hislop.
Chair, it's, just a little bit of information, because this one I don't think would be non-notifiable. It's to do with the Maxwelton High School site and the inclusion. In the past, I think there was a site adjacent to Rosefield Salvage, which would be down one side of the Rosefield Salvage, and this would be at the rear of Rosefield Salvage. Now, my understanding, the site that was on the eastern boundary or western boundary, it was rejected by planners at initial area committee, when it was the area committees that dealt with the planning, because of noise nuisance and the detrimental impact it would have on industry in that site. I do note that this is looking at having additional bunding and noise attenuation.
Councillor, could you refer us to which page this is on?
161, it's Rosefield Salvage 548001 at the bottom of page 161. And it was just, could this be an issue in the future? And as such, maybe we'll be putting something in that will actually be not able to be implemented.
Yes, Leader, the allocation itself does recognise that issue and states specifically that the site guidance requires, first of all, a master plan to be prepared, and it also acknowledges that there is the issue of the existing industrial estate, and therefore requires a noise assessment, would need to be carried out, and appropriate noise attenuation measures put in place, including potentially a buffer zone to avoid any potential land use conflict, so that there are measures contained within the site guidance that's in the plan to deal with that particular issue.
Councillor Gilroy?
I think we're creating a problem here that doesn't have to be created, because we've got our industrial site and we want to allocate houses, and I think they are incompatible, and I don't think we should be setting something up in order to go through all the rigmarole of noise attenuation measures and buffer zones, because actually I think if you've got a good going industrial estate, to have houses next door does not work. And so I would suggest that this is not a sensible option on this site, and that it shouldn't be there.
To bear in mind, though, that we're not actually at the stage where we can recommend things coming back out again. And
But we can sorry, can we not recommend to the reporter, though, that he looks at it?
all you can say, I think, at this stage is that you believe that there is merits in the representation. I think that's as far as we can go. I wondered if there was any alternative in terms of strengthening up the master planning, which might to take into account some of the concerns. Councillor Key.
Yes, Chair. I live up fairly close to that area, and there's a field between the estate I live and Rosefield Salvage, and that has been refused planning permission for a number of times over the last number of years. Now, the Mark Sutton High School site includes a playing field between Rosefield Salvage and where the housing would, I would assume the housing would go, where Mark Sutton High School is at the present moment. So there's plenty of space there between, I would assume, where the houses would go and Rosefield Salvage. And I think people are looking for problems that's not necessarily there. And bunding would help to alleviate that noise as well. So I don't think it's necessary to delete it.
Councillor Ferguson and Councillor Nicholson.
Thanks. Just further to what Councillor McKee was saying there, it's about the Max High and the playing fields, because there's no guarantee that the playing fields will remain as it is in the plan. And the bit that I'm a bit worried about here is the comment at the page of 161, Mr. Hillson's bit about the rounding off. Because the rounding off, in actual fact, I would say is a squaring off, because there's like a Mully Galloway of field which comes down with DGHP houses at one side, the service road for Max High on the other side, and this bit of green land, which was white originally, but I believe has now been designated green. So I'm trying to find a way here where we can do this, because for me the common sense approach that would actually be around it round from the end of the DGHP houses round to the Max High site, and no longer have that as farmland, because we're talking a relatively small amount of space there. Especially if we're going to have an issue at the other site about noise, and we've been here before through planning, is how do we move it slightly to the west, everything, and have a buffer between the industrial estate and the school?
Don't think we're actually able to do that at this present time, because we haven't consulted on that option.
No, Leader, there is provision within the proposed plan. The reference is made to a master plan and the option internally to the site of creating a buffer zone or a buffer strip. What we have essentially is a disused school site, so it's a brownfield site that would then require to be redeveloped. Part of the site, the northern boundary of it, adjoins the existing industrial estate, and it's that boundary that would require there to be suitable noise attenuation, including potentially a buffer zone to make sure that there was no impact onto new residential development. But the site of the school is certainly big enough to accommodate that and still achieve a satisfactory housing scheme.
Councillor Nichols?
Yeah, thanks very much. Can I come back in before Ronnie? Okay. It's the same thing, yeah. Is that okay, Ronnie? Yeah. Yeah, it's the other side of the service road I'm talking about, Steve. The green field. It's a green field, but it's not currently white, I think, in the LDP, but then going to green in the new one. So that then becomes like a peninsula of green right down into the borough, and that for me is the why is that being treated differently from the school side?
That particular field is outside the settlement boundary.
That was exactly my point. Is rather than round in the way we should have been rounding the natural boundary, because the new DGHP houses there are further out than the green fields.
Councillor Nicholson?
Yes, another side that Andy's talking about, and whilst I have no objections that is outside the settlement, I have no objections to that part being developed either, but it's a small part and it could be a buffer. But there is actually a wooded area between the playfields and the industrial site as well. Now maybe that could be extended or thickened up, or something like that for noise. But I've no real big issue with housing up there. I think it's a good thing to have that developed as social housing in that area, and I don't think there is any real problems with the industrial site as such. But perhaps additional noise suppression things could be put in.
It's a slightly confusing submission here, because it starts off talking about the allocation of the site, and then it says allocation of the site in the plan should be accompanied by a detailed master plan which takes into account the surrounding land uses. And I would have thought that could have been incorporated, that part of it could be incorporated into the master plan. So it's a bit odd looking. Just maybe clarify what they're actually asking for, because at one point it looks like deallocation, and then the other point it looks like a master plan.
The change needed, there are two representations that have been made, and I think it's important that we have to bear in mind that the purpose of our response is to respond specifically to the representations that have been made. One of those representations, which is the first one that's on page 161, is saying that the site should be reused for community facilities and not for housing. So that's a complete separate issue that we have provided a draft response to. The second representation is asking for the site to be remove housing allocation from plans. So they are actually asking us to take the housing designation or the housing allocation off the Maxwell High site.
Yeah, what's the one that then says representation on page 162? Representation or allocation of the site in the plan should be accompanied by a detailed master plan. That is down as being a representation. On page 162.
I think that's, without trying to put words into their mouth, that's the kind of fallback position that if we do keep the site in the plan, then it should be the subject of a detailed master plan, which is what we have said in the plan in any event. So I think that issue is already dealt with.
Katie, Councillor Katie Hagman, followed by David McKee.
Thank you, Leader. I have brought my tablet in with me today, which has been really useful because I'm actually looking at the site. I'm looking at the minute and the full LGB2, which we got in January, and it was part of our papers. So I can actually see, but none of the members would appear to have that in front of us. Is it possible to actually put this map on the screen so members can actually see what we're discussing? Because having a description from some local members who live close by is not actually useful and it doesn't really inform the debate properly. Would it be possible to actually put these specific maps on the screen so all the members can see? Because I'm aware that I'm looking at the map just now, but none of the other members are.
I think that...
Councillor Hagman saying local knowledge is no good. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that other members may not have that local knowledge.
I don't know that the maps are available to put on the screen at the moment. I mean, they've not been prepared for it. Councillor McKee.
Leader, can I just explain where I'm coming from? Rosefield Salvage was based at Rosefield, which if people not knowledgeable of the area knows is at the other side of the Nith, up at Trequia. Now they moved up to the industrial estate on Iron Grey Road because houses were built next door to them, and the people that lived in the houses objected to the noise. So Rosefield Salvage have been up there for a number of years now, and the reason for blocking any building in the field next door to that estate was because of noise. And I would suggest that the playing field, the football pitch, rugby pitch at Marks High would about the same size, same width as that field that we've blocked any proposals for building in. And I would suggest that that area would address the issue of noise from Rosefield Salvage, because we certainly don't want to be building close to an industrial estate and forcing a company to have to move again, or maybe even collapse. So I think a bit of work in noise attenuation and that sort of thing, there's no reason why the Marksholm High School estate can't be reused for housing.
Which would be the purpose of the master plan?
Sorry?
Which would be the purpose of the master plan?
Exactly.
So, have we exhausted this topic? And the other? Okay, Councillor Nicholson and Councillor Johnson.
Sorry, I was going to something else.
It's not anything more on this particular site. Any recommendations? Any in terms of? We'll go with the recommendation. Are we content to go with the recommendation? Okay. And it's okay. We're still on issue 12, the Dumfries Town. Any other issues? Councillor Nicholson and Councillor Hislop. Oh, sorry, Councillor Johnson. Oh.
Yes. Page 153, 377.001. That's Dumfries H3 Noble Hill. Could I suggest that the change wanted there, support the removal of Noble Hill from the plan, has no merit?
It's a good try, Councillor.
Yeah, no, the supporting the removal of the Dumfries Noble Hill from the plan has no merit.
The trouble is that is supporting what's already in the plan, so... Okay, Councillor Hislop and I think Councillor Johnson, you had a point as well, didn't you?
Thank you, Leader. Again, it's on page 153, DFSH5, Ladyfield. There's been quite a strong representation about this, and I fully realise that we We cannot take it out of the plan. I'm not even remotely suggesting it. What I'm actually asking about here is the council's response is very lengthy and addresses a great number of the issues. And I wondered how binding is this response? If plans come forward, will we be sticking to the letter of this response?
I suppose, assuming it is, this is really with regard to the master plan around Ladyfield. And
yes. The response will go to the reporter, and the response essentially reflects what's in the allocation in the proposed plan, which suggests that there are a number of safeguards that would need to be built into the master planning exercise, and a number of those safeguards directly address issues that have been raised by those who have made representations at this stage. So that would cover things like the transport and road network issues. It would include things like the quality and layout of any new development having to respect the fact that it's partly within the conservation area and also affects a number of listed buildings which are adjacent within the Crichton campus, including those at Ladyfield East and West. There may be scope, if members have any concerns about some of the points that have been raised in those submissions by local residents, there will be scope for us to expand on that list to make sure that the reporter fully considers all of those points that have been made by those submitting representations, including, for example, the potential impact on existing properties that are within or adjacent to the site, and also to take into account things like potential impact on residential amenity. Those are things that will be looked at as part of a planning application. However, it can give them greater strength if they're included and captured in a master planning exercise. One of the good points about this site is that given the council's ownership of it, it's in a much better position to be able to control the way in which that master planning process is developed. You may remember a few years ago there was a community charrette process that was undertaken, funded by Scottish Government, that fully involved local residents in developing a master plan for that site. Now that master plan was never taken forward, but I think this does present the opportunity to do a similar type of process that fully involves local residents to make sure that a number of the issues and concerns that have been raised are able to be properly addressed as part of the master plan process.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, my question was going to be exactly the same as Councillor Johnson on Dumfries H5. And I clearly see it's been up for development since 1993, but I can also clearly see there's a conflict here because we've designated not only for development but also as a conservation area, and that's my worry. I'm just wondering, I mean, Steve, you already touched on a few things about it, the master plan that would incorporate some of that, but I've still got my concerns.
Yeah, and certainly the fact of there being a conservation area doesn't mean that there should be no development. It means that the development that there is needs to be of a sufficient quality to reflect the fact that it is in a conservation area. And we have a number of conservation areas across the region, and it's important that the development is still promoted and encouraged within conservation areas, but the bar, if you like, in the quality bar should be set significantly higher to ensure that suitable quality of development is delivered. If you look, for example, at the new development in the Vennel that's approaching completion, that's the standard of development that would be required within a conservation area, and will add significantly to the vitality of Dumfries conservation area at that point. So it's not a complete moratorium on all development.
Okay. Anything else? Councillor Hislop.
It's with regard to page 169, there's 3 linked to sort of freight transport, truck stop, I think it was called, in one proposal. I realise that from discussion we're not able to change anything in and out today, but could you reassure me that if a suitable proposal for a truck stop was to come forward, is there policies available for a site on the bypass to be developed? I think one of the reasons given was the first place you come to a physical barrier in the road from Gretna to Stranraer is the roundabout at Solway Gate. Is there a chance that policies under economic development could be used to allow land in that situation to be developed for, say, a truck stop?
Okay. Steve?
We have, Leader, within the proposed plan, policy ED1 on business and industry, which provides for business and industrial development on unallocated land. So this provides us with a significant amount of flexibility to be able to respond to unforeseen new developments coming forward. So I would suggest that there is a policy framework already there that would allow members to agree such a proposal if they were convinced that it provided significant economic benefits. Suitable proposal, of course.
Does that answer your question? Okay. Is that all on Dumfries? No. Councillor Carruthers?
No, I think just to add to what Ivor's already conveyed, I think it's conveyed it well, but I think in regards to, there's not a stopping point for truck drivers between Southwaite and Stranraer, as far as I'm aware, a proper stop point. So I think a truck stop in that area, again, we have drivers doing all sorts of things in regards to necessity, I think, in the lay-bys that they have along there. I get a lot of complaints, certainly in my ward, in regards to litter, trash and different things that are emptied over the fence or in lay-bys, the overspilled bins that are there as well. But I think certainly there's merits in regards to the arguments that were put forward there. I was certainly supportive of them, but I think
are you satisfied with Steve's answer that this issue could be dealt with under other policies?
I think
to do with academic development.
I think there's merits within the arguments that are there, but I think with the reassurances that we've had from Steve, certainly that there's enough within the ED1 at this moment in time in regards to that, but probably a trick missed in real terms.
Thanks. Okay, if there's nothing further on issue 12, can we go on to issue 13, which is the Mid-Galloway Housing Market area and the Stranraer Housing Market area. Any issues that members want to raise in connection with issue 13, pages 171 to 181? Councillor Scobie.
It's maybe clarification, and I'm looking at page 180, and it's the one Network Rail where it's proposed, or at least to put in LD2. LDB2 is the land at the old station in Station Street. Yet the objections, it's just clarification, the objections from Network, it's recommended that the developers are required to undertake transport assessment to identify impacts on station facilities and train capacity. I only wish there was trains coming into Stranraer just now, but that's another issue. Because the other part for the response is the council's significant impact on station capacity. I just wonder what's in mind here on both sides, whether it's to develop that site as no longer a goods yard as it was in the past. Has Network Rail got any idea, or is it more akin now to housing development? Is it industrial in terms of Network Rail's consideration, or is it more akin to housing? And notwithstanding what it says in the previous transport minimised travel by car.
I think that certainly the council's representation is with regard to housing as a site for housing.
The leader, the representation from Network Rail, which is assume the one that Councillor Scobie is referring to, which is at the top of page 180, is a general comment from Network Rail about the totality of allocated sites in Stranraer and raising some concerns about the potential for those cumulatively to have an impact on Stranraer rail station. So it's a general comment that they're making and suggesting that developers be required to undertake transport assessments to identify impacts on station facilities and train capacity. Now, we already deal with this in policy T2 within our plan, and we have already indicated that there will be some minor wording changes to policy T2 to address Network Rail's comments. They've raised this issue, leader, in respect to just about every settlement, I think, in Dumfries and Galloway that has or is close to a railway station.
Yes, yeah. You've seen a lot of the train operators who you think might actually quite like to have some more passengers on their trains, but the
there's no clarification then, it's just a general point being made by Network Rail and they've no intention of doing anything with that yard.
No, well, unless they're going to do something with every single yard across Dumfries and Galloway, it seems to be their stock response for everywhere where there's a station.
And likewise for the one below, in terms of the Mirris petrol station, the objections, my understanding was that has already been completed on perhaps under LDP 1.
Sorry, leader, the objection relates to site which is being allocated or proposed to be allocated for business development. And we certainly consider that it should remain in the plan. I don't have any information about planning application at this point in time.
Anything further on issue 13? Not, we go on to what I think is in the papers as issue 16A, but is in fact issue 14A, which is stewardship HMA, the district centres on 182 to 194. Any issues on that? If not, we'll move on to 16B, stewardship HMA local centres on pages 195 to 203. Okay. Then issue 15, which is the A74M and Chapel Cross, on pages 204 to 206. And finally, issue 16 on proposals, maps, settlement statements, introduction, appendices and glossary, which are contained in pages 207 to 209. In that case...
Chair, sorry, Leader, can I just confirm 207 is not actually the maps or settlements, it's actually still Chapel Cross. So can I just ask where this proposal for the map, settlement statements, introduction, what page is that actually on? Because the numbers don't correspond to the papers we've got in front of us.
Check. No, they're not. They're still in 207.
Yeah, leader, page 207 is the start of the representations
Yes.
in relation to proposals, maps, settlement statements, and etc. So 207, 208 and 209. So the first of those comments, natural power, is a comment about the proposals maps.
I see that. We're just missing the heading on 207. That's my error. Thank you.
Okay, can we proceed to the recommendations? I think we've spent a fair amount of time considering. Are we prepared to agree the Council's proposed response to the representations? Okay. Can we have...
Just to clarify, is that with the one that we agreed to modify?
Yes, yes. I think we note the representations received. Content? Content to note the process and next stages, and to authorise officers to submit to Scottish Ministers a request is to establish the examination process, which is the next stage. Okay. And finally, to approve the Head of Planning and Regulatory Services to make any final checks to deal with the technical accuracy of Schedule 4 forms. Yep. We don't want to be doing it. And to approve the statement of conformity with participation statements at Appendix 4 for submission to Scottish Ministers prior to the examination of the plan. Content? Good. Okay, excellent. I can just finally say that obviously LDP2 has been a very long process. It started in November 2015 and it's taken us to almost 3 years later. I'd just finally like to thank the officers concerned for their hard work, because obviously it has been a long process for them going through all this and examining all the representations and so on. So thanks for all that. Thank you very much. Okay, finally, I have no urgent business in need of a decision today. Finally, so we're moving on to item 5, where members are asked to consider adopting a resolution to exclude the public from the meeting in terms of section 50A4 and paragraphs 6 and 9 of part 1 of schedule 7A of the Local Government Scotland Act of 1973. Are we agreed to adopt this resolution? Agreed. Thank you. I'll give some time for the